Welcome back to Area Diesel Service. Today, we're going to bring you a new collaborative episode with fellow YouTube creator Hamiltonville Farm. If you didn't come to us from Hamiltonville Farm's channel, please go over there, check them out, tell them that we sent you. In this box today, we have an injection pump off of a telehandler.
Mid to late 80s model Lull 844 TT34 High Lander II, according to the sticker. If we can get this thing cranked and we can see that it raises up and down, I'm gonna take it home.
We've got some issues within the injection pump. At least that's what we believe at this point. We're gonna pop this thing open and have a look. Got a little blowout there. Hopefully we didn't suffer any damage in transit. Double boxed at least. She is greasy. I think the story was they went out, got the machine running, went to load it, and it kind of died on them. They called. We actually had a few conversations about this thing. They had the top cover off. They were questioning the solenoid. So this has an electromagnetic solenoid under the cover. You give it 12 volts or potentially 24 volts depending on the application, and it moves the metering valve and allows the pump to produce fuel. When you take the voltage away, springs shut, turns the pump off. They were questioning the effectiveness of the solenoid. They did have the cover off. They were able to manually manipulate the metering valve and get the machine to run. I think they got it loaded up. I think they got it home, and I think they still had an issue. I believe they've replaced the solenoid to no avail. They decided to pull the pump off and send it to us to have a look. We may try to determine the mode of failure before a complete disassembly. There was brief conversation about just fix what's wrong and return, but based on the age and general condition, I would say it's probably going to be a good candidate for the full service. Based on the data plate, someone has been here before. I can see that they've engraved the plate with an electric pencil of sorts. It's not in its factory configuration. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with what was done before. Again, likely just a case of sitting around, which is about as hard on a pump as anything else. That's the story on this one. We're going to get this back to the pump shop. We'll bring you along, show you some of the process, and see what we can find for Hank and Wiley over at Hamiltonville Farm.
Hi everybody, I got this pump here for Hamiltonville Farms. I heard that from Kurt that it was on a telehandler, which is a little unusual, but it's just a JDB, John Deere JDB pump, which is really the only difference between these and a regular DBG is just the flange. They just have this extra little pilot here that takes a different O-ring, but other than that, they're pretty similar. I heard they've tried several things. They got it to run, then it quit running, then they got it to kind of run again, then it quit running again. One thing that I've kind of noticed is this solenoid here has got a problem of some sort, because this stud and this stud are two different heights, which is not normal. For some reason, whether it's just not pulled up all the way, I don't really know. But that, from my just thought right now, is the fact that that solenoid is sitting in there crooked, which obviously is not good. It probably isn't going to work that way. This little band here isn't on there right. Not that it's really going to cause a problem the way it is. It's kind of flattened out. I basically just got to cap it up, wash it and blast it, and then we'll tear into it and see if we can't see any smoking gun here that is causing their problem. Hopefully I can find something specific that I can tell them, yeah, you know, this is your problem, but we'll just have to tear into it and see. I'm going to try and peel this top cover off if I can kind of see anything that I think might be causing a problem. Well, that's a problem right there. So that check ball in there has collapsed completely, which is strange. There's still some spring action in there, but I don't know what happened to that spring. It folded up or did something in there, but yeah, that's not good. Which that might have been a big cause of his problems, honestly. This little idle screw. Yeah, that wasn't very tight. Okay, well. Oh! So, they removed the plunger from this, probably so they could then determine on whether or not it was causing the problem. And they shoved a piece of hose in there to keep it in the run position, which I've never really seen done before, but I mean, it would do the same thing. Okay. That's odd. For some reason, that one stud is longer than the other. And it doesn't look like it broke off. Huh. I don't know. Strange. I don't really know what transpired with this, but it's going to get replaced regardless. I got this piece of hose in here. My garbage. But it does look clean. I do see a piece of flex ring. So definitely know that the flex ring is busted. Which isn't unusual. I mean, everything is moving free. I'm wondering if his biggest problem was that return connector and with the flex ring being out. I have a feeling between those two things, that's probably going to be the major issue. It's one of them things you just never really know what you're going to find whenever you're dealing with problem pumps. Yeah, this thing is, it's definitely clean. That's a good thing. Has a steel plug in it, so it's not like the piston is going to fall out. It's a vane pump here, so this builds all your transfer pressure. There's a little bit of wear to it, but nothing crazy. It was probably still working fine. Nope. That was kind of loose. That's interesting. A lot of times if it has any bad fuel in it, it all kind of settles down in this advanced area. So we'll see what this looks like. It looks like it's going to be clean, so, which I would kind of guess that was just how the rest of the pump looks. Most of this stuff is just pieces of the flex ring. Yeah, if anything, it just is full of flex ring pieces, which doesn't really surprise me. So we definitely know there's a for sure problem with the flex ring. all looks good, which normally these don't wear out anyway, so try and get this piston ring off without breaking it. There we go. And using a special bit for this cam screw so we don't break it. It wasn't super tight. Don't see anything wrong with it though. Time to see if there's any flex ring even left. I kinda doubt it, just by the way this has been looking. Oh, there it went. Yep. So this is supposed to be attached to that with the flex ring. That all looks good. There's very little wear on the weights. But, okay. So even though there's a little bit of wear on these here pins, a lot of times whenever this flex ring goes bad, this thing will sit in here and then it'll jiggle back and forth and then it'll wear out these pins. But this one has a little bit of wear, but it's still at a acceptable level to be reused. So I'm not really super concerned with that. There we go. Yeah, so just like that, you know, this thing is gone. So this has now turned into that, which again is a common problem with these, which is probably a lot of his problem. It just got so plugged up that it just wouldn't do anything for him. So other than that, cam looks okay. Don't see any major problems with that. Those look fine. Those are nice and free. Keepers out of there. All that looks okay. The rotor looks real good. Has a little bit of wear, but I think it'll probably work fine. The delivery valve has some wear, but it was probably still functioning. It might have just been a little low on horsepower, but other than that, honestly, the biggest problem I found was between that flex ring and then that return connector right at the very beginning. Other than that, the pump was clean, other than the little particles floating around. And like I said, you know, we don't really know how that solenoid was working originally. I haven't seen anything on it to see if I can give any determination on that. I just know that obviously they pulled that plunger out of it. Pump there really just needs a normal rebuild. Not really anything too out of the ordinary. Metering valve, delivery valve blades. Solenoid is going to be the biggest thing. Probably also the most expensive part of the whole deal. And I don't know, because normally that little band that was on here normally goes on this side. So I don't know if they flipped that around and that was their problem. I mean, it's just a ground strap. So if they flip that ground strap around and they try to hook their power to here and their ground to here, then it might have been shorting out. I don't really know. I'll push that pilot tube out and we'll clean that up and put a new pilot tube in it whenever we go to rebuild it and run it on the stand. Hopefully it works just fine and send it back to them. It should be a-okay. I'd maybe suggest them blowing out the return line since they got all them little flex ring pieces in there. we will get after it then. I got the pump back in here, got the parts cleaned up. Luckily, this pump was clean already, so I didn't have to do a whole lot to it, didn't have to run through the silent cleaner or anything like that. So that was good. Looked through my parts, replaced the ones I thought needed to be replaced, like the solenoid. I did get a new return connector since his was basically collapsed. And the other main thing was the solenoid. So we got, brand new solenoid, so that's good. Won't have any troubles with that. This one here, this is his weight gauge, okay? And I talked about it briefly whenever I tore it apart, that these pins didn't look too bad. And they have a little bit of wear to them from the flex ring being destroyed, but nothing crazy. I definitely thought they were reasonable. Now this one here, I got this one, came out of a customer pump, however many days ago. It was in my scrap pile. Anyways, this pin here, you can see it is dang near worn in half. So it's missing. This pin should come out basically all the way to here. Clacks in there for so long that then that's what you get. So it's one of those things that, I understand that whenever you're running a machine, okay, it's starting to cause some problems, and you go, okay, well, how far can we run this? Well, that's kind of the difference between, okay, yeah, we got a problem, we need to fix it, and, well, let's run it as long as we can and see how far it can last before we have to fix it. Because I understand, cost comes into some play, but it's a give and take. You have the machine down, which is going to cost you money and a rebuild cost, but also if you run the machine for too long, it could create further problems. Because if these pins completely break off, which I have seen, they, obviously it goes through the pump, and it could create other problems. I got all the parts here laid out, got everything buffed. I did miss something here, which I'll have to rebuff that. That's no big deal. We will start off with putting our pilot tube in, so that way the epoxy can get to be setting while we're doing other things. Got a brand new pilot tube, fits inside the bore, so I know that's not a problem. Got my epoxy here. Now with this pilot tube, I can't remember if I've said, I'm sure I've said in previous videos, that these pilot tubes are set into a certain dimension. So they can't be too far out of the pump, but they also can't be too far into the pump either. You can, obviously you have a little bit of leeway either way, but I have an actual tool that sets that to the correct dimension. Get that close, wipe off some of this excess. Handy thing, always having a rag laying around. Okay, so my tool here has a thin side here, and it has the deep side. So since this housing has this extra flange here, it takes the thin side of this tool. Because again, that then sets that, just barely proud, basically, which then means that it'll be correct on the inside of the housing. So we're just going to set that off to the side for now while that's drying. We will check my timing mark here. Just hit this with a piece of sandpaper. So, gonna check our timing mark. Got my graph here. I have my timing degree wrote down from what the spec calls for, which that is about right there, which we are about we're basically a degree off, which is technically okay per Standardine spec, okay? But me personally, I like it to be a little closer than that. I like to be about half degree. So what I'm going to go do, I'm going to go grind that mark off and remark it. Got my mark ground off there. I also buffed that spot there so that looks a lot better. Now we will go back to our correct degree, 6, 7.5. I'll make a pencil line to start. Now I've seen some people use, there's different types of scribes that are out there, and some people use a chisel. I personally use this electric engraver, basically, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, electric pencil. So it will just send a electric current through this and it'll scribe a line. I'm sure it's probably not the easiest for you to see, but here, let me try and hold it like this. Okay. Now we just gotta double check that it's actually correct. We are within my half a degree. So, we are now to what I deem to be good. Sometimes if you get, if you're a degree off in the pump and then, okay, you have a little bit of slack in your timing gear, well, then some of these things kind of compound on each other. And then it's like, oh, well, I have to adjust the pump, and I just like it to be a little bit tighter just in case, because most of these machines that these pumps go on are probably older than me, and I already know how tired I am, so I can't imagine how tired an older machine is. I will also say that this will be now the second video that we've made with this camera and this kind of setup. So again, let us know kind of in the comments what you think of this camera, whether or not I sound pretty enough for your guys' ears. Whether you think this is a better angle, just let us know. See what you guys think. So, got the new flex ring on here. New flex ring comes in the gasket kit, no problem there. That'll just set off to the side for right now. Got our rotor, and we got our brand new delivery valve. This one is not oversized, standard size. Spray that down, make sure that's clean. Should just fall right down in there. Got our delivery valve spring. We've got our stop. Just sanded down the bottom of that plug just to make sure that it's smooth. Okay, so screw this in. Torque this screw in. Again, if it's too tight, it'll seize. If it's too loose, it'll leak. And if it's too loose and it leaks, then it will most likely not make the cranking fuel, because as it's pumping, it's not delivering all out of your discharge port. It's then, instead of all coming out of these, it's actually bypassing around that and escaping. So you're losing some of your high pressure fuel delivery. I buffed this head, which it looks decent. This rotor has a little bit of wear to it, but I don't think it'll really cause any problems. Make sure that's nice and free, which that feels good. Make sure these plungers are free. This is actually very important that these plungers are free, because if they're sticking at all, then it might not they might not pop out at cranking, so then your engine might not start. Again, I make sure these rollers are free, which this roller here is actually sticking a little bit, which isn't necessarily uncommon. I just take a little piece of sandpaper to the edges here, because sometimes they just get a little nick on them. If I have to, I do have a little file as well. We're definitely better than what we were, but still not really quite perfect. Oh yeah, much better. Yeah, even this one's sticking a little bit. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so I'm happy with those now. Because again, if those stick and for some reason they don't spin, then they'll create a flat spot and then it'll ruin your cam, and then, you know, real bad things happen. Stick my adapter on here, gonna check to make sure that delivery valve stop doesn't leak. I've seen pictures of guys making their own adapters to do the same thing, and they use all sorts of different types of methods, but as long as it works, that's all that matters. So anyways, I don't see any air bubbles coming out of this stop, so that means that it's a tight fit and we won't have any problems. Then we will check our roller to roller. I got my stock roller to roller wrote down on my test sheet, which we are just a scotch low. So I'm going to give that just a little bump. It's really close. It would probably be fine if I just left it, but it's easier to adjust it here than adjust it on the stand. So yeah, I'm going to leave it right there. Checked our cam before. Cam looks fine. I don't see any major problems with that. We will put this on in the correct direction of rotation. There's an arrow on both sides of the cam. Got to make sure that's on the correct way. Line our lines up here. Otherwise our timing would be off if you got that on the opposite way. Put our clip, so now that's held on there. We will just around, put my head O-ring on here. Got our little half moon plates, our keepers. And then now our retaining ring. I normally try and put the gap 90 degrees from the gap in between those two plates. I've heard that could create a problem if you line them up, so that's why I just put them opposite. Okay, line everything up here, put our weights in. These weights don't really have any wear to them, so there's no problem reusing them. The biggest thing is they get wear right here on the heel of the weight, and so you can see the heel here and the toe is on this side. They'll get wear there and it'll creep up, and then it won't open up properly. So, which these ones here look good, so we don't have to worry about it. Got our thrust washer, thrust sleeve. They go in here. Make sure that it is in underneath. All those look good. So basically now, got our pilot tube in. It should be dry enough by now. Got our head built up. Put our housing on the pump vise there, and we'll start throwing her together. Okay, got the housing mounted here on the pump vise. Got that nice and tight. Start with the governor part here. So stick my governor arm in, and my pivot shaft. This pivot shaft has just touch of wear, but nothing too drastic, so I'm not too concerned. There we go. Moves good. Got our new O-rings here. Got our plugs, put a little bit of grease on them. That works good, which honestly normally I don't have any trouble with those. Again, if you build it right, then normally it works just fine. Put some grease there on the inside of the housing so the head will slide in there. Got our head here. So we got my dot in here facing towards me. I just kind of line everything up, make it a little bit easier for me whenever I put everything else in. Okay. Again, don't want to go in too far, because then once you pull it out, you could rip that head O-ring. Throw these bolts in just finger tight for right now. I am not replacing the metering valve. I thought it looked fine, so no sense of replacing something that doesn't need to be replaced. Got my shim, my spring. Stick this in here. Make sure that's free, which it is. I'm just going to stick this shaft in there to hold the weights from coming out. Let's put that right there for now. So again, metering valve is free, moves freely, that's no problem. We will stick our bottom head bolt in and make sure that this little check ball in here is free, which it is. Luckily with the whenever the flex string does normally break apart, luckily being here in the main part of the housing, it just kind of filters up and goes out your return. You know, it's not like it goes down and plugs up your head locator screw or anything like that, plugs up your advance. So if there's any consolation to it, you know, at least it tries to exit the pump. Guaranteed then it goes through your return and goes back to your tank, but torque these head bolts down, starting with the bottom. That, we can take that loose for right now. Tie that back up. So I got the drive shaft sitting on a head down here, so that's why I could take that loose. Got our cam screw here. Yeah, didn't really see any problems with it, so there's no reason why I can't reuse it. I would say on most standardized pumps, especially like a DBG style or JDB, you know, you're gonna reuse, you know, 95% of the parts. You have, you know, your common, like, let's say 8 or so wear parts that normally will go bad, but even then, sometimes they will and sometimes they won't. So you just gotta kind of look at all of them. That's also kind of where experience comes in, knowing what you're looking at and whether somewhere is good and somewhere isn't. This is just here a bushing that goes in to help keep everything centered. Cam screws free, it's not bound up. Now we can go with our advance. Put a new O-ring underneath the piston ring. Make sure it's not twisted. So I'm here to tell you, it's always the little things that make a difference. Just because something's done right 90% of the way doesn't mean that 10% won't get you in the long run. Got our piston ring on here with the new O-ring. Got to put your piston in the right direction. So that slid right in, so that's good. New O-rings. And put a little bit of grease on. Put a little bit of grease on the inside, it'll hold the slide washer. Again, this is a clockwise pump, so the power piston has to go on the clockwise side of the housing. Got our adjuster screw here. Take some new O-ring. I just kind of try and leave it kind of where it came in at. And normally you can tell where it was sitting beforehand. And of course, I can always adjust it on the stand, so it's not that big of a deal, but helps me from spending too much time on the test stand. And this here is just white lithium grease. You know, you can use kind of other different lubricants. It's just the nice thing with white lithium grease is that once diesel fuel or calibration fluid in our instance hits it, it dissolves. So you don't just have clumps of grease just sitting in your pump. That's part of the reason why we use it. Put our bottom plug in on the new camera setup, but for me it's a little nice because it's a little bit more natural for me. It's just me standing in my room working. I can kind of go at my normal pace. This is his original supply pump liner, which it looks just fine. Put our liner in, new O-ring. These are new blades. Stick them in, 2 at the bottom, 2 at the top. Put a little bit of fluid in there. A lot of these aluminum parts, whenever I go to tear them down after I've torn it all apart, I'll wash them with our solvent, but then I'll also blast them just to get any residue off or any contamination, which luckily, like I said, this one was clean, but it's still just one of those things. It's just a standard procedure. You know, you gotta go through the steps every single time so you make sure that everything is consistent. I'm just slightly snugging these right now because I will have to torque those in. Okay, so had to make sure which side of the pump the shaft, throttle shaft went on. So I'm going to switch this bolt out for one that has a hole in it. Luckily I got some extra bolts laying around. Not that that probably really surprises you guys. I got parts. Luckily these, you know, these bolts are just common bolts compared to the rest of the stand iron pumps. So torque this in. Now, make sure this is smooth, which that spins perfectly, so that's good. Helps that I reused his liner. Sometimes if you change liners, it'll make everything tight, so you just gotta watch for that. So now, basically, we just got the regulator here. Got a brand new piston going in there. Got our spring. Now our adjuster. Orifice is open. So basically I just preset that to a certain dimension and then I just go from there on the test stand. Some of these things I also have explained a little bit more in further detail on some of my older videos, so if you really are watching it and think, oh, well, I wonder why, this is like this, you may be able to find out the answer on our previous videos. Brand new O-rings. I just put a little bit of lubricant on that so that filter slides on good. Nothing crazy there. Put some new grease. O-rings. And this just gets tightened down. You don't want to crank on that too tight because you will snap that head off of that regulator. So we got our governor spring, little idle capsule with our little idle spring. And this is just a spacer, mainly for your lever position. So technically, you can kind of change where your lever sits depending on how thick of a spacer you have in there. Which especially cool, of course, in this situation, we're just reusing what came in it, which is how it is most of the time. But the only time that really changes is if I'm doing like a exchange pump and it's a core that we bought from somewhere, then someone might have messed with it beforehand. So you do kind of have to watch. In my instance, I have to watch some of that, but for a repair and return or someone trying to do it themselves, most of the time you just go back with what they came in with. Okay, so that spring there is fine. Put new O-rings on the shaft and then the other side of the plug. Grease on this. The grease on this helps the shaft slide, spin easy too. You don't want it to be super tight going back and forth. This goes in there. So that looks good. It's a brand new clip here. Retaining clip. Okay. Also, the reason why I switched out that one bolt with one that has a hole in it is whenever I'm done with this pump, I will wire tie this tight through that hole so that way then the weights don't fall out, in shipping. So that's why I switched that out. Got our low idle screw here. Getting the old O-ring out of there. Got our top cover here, low idle screw, turn, solenoid. Again, I blasted this to make sure that it's clean. Got our brand new solenoid. Make sure it fits in here good. Insulators, they go on both of these. Because if you don't have these insulators on here, then it'll short out and then your tractor won't start because it's not pulling it in. And this is missing some washers and stuff, so I just gotta find some of them, which is no big deal. It's a common occurrence, honestly. Okay, so this is where I'm going to deviate from how it came in. So he originally had this ground strap on this side, where most of the time, and by most of the time I'm meaning like 95 to 99% of the time, this ground strap is on this side. So what I also did was I looked on my breakdown and it said, per the breakdown, to put the ground strap on the left side viewing from the transfer pump end. So that's the way I'm going to go back with it. Which again, isn't normally any huge problem with him, because if they have to, then they just switch their wires. Got our new O-ring here for our top cover. Got that on there. Stick a washer underneath that strap. Stick this on here and make sure that it is behind that governor arm, because that governor, as your flipper on your solenoid, is what pushes your governor arm forward, which pushes it to shut off. Which is also why they had taken that plunger out, so that way they knew that it wasn't pushing it to shut off. At least I'm assuming that's why they did it. That would make the most sense. Tighten these down and we're getting pretty dang close here. This stuff here I'm going to leave off for now until after I get it tested, then I'll put them on. Stick this through here. So now I just got to stamp it with our stamp, basically with a serial number, so I know who built it, what spec it was set at, things like that. Just a record, of course. Okay, so we are basically done building this pump. Pull this off, throw it on the stand, and make sure it passes all the specs. Okay, so we got the pump on here. I got it warmed up so it does pump, but other than that I haven't done anything to it. So we're going to go through everything, make sure it passes all my specs here, and hopefully I don't foresee that we're going to have any problems, but you never know. Okay, so I can already tell my transfer pressure is too high, so that just means I screwed this in too far whenever I preset it. Back that out a few turns, try it again. One of his biggest complaints though is they weren't sure about the solenoid, so pull that off. That's right off. Put it back on, start pumping. So at least that aspect we know is working good. Pressure was good now, so now I'm checking my main fuel. My main fuel is in spec, so now since it's in spec, I can check my cranking because those two are connected. And luckily, our pump is hot and we're over our minimum requirements. So now we'll check my advance through this window. Coming in a little early, so I just got to adjust this screw to make it come into spec. Okay, so my governor is running a little slow. So what I got to do is change my governor spring to a softer governor spring, and that should give me a little bit quicker regulation to so that way my RPMs stay within my range I need it. So I'll have to find me a spring, and then I'll come back and see if it'll go in the right direction. Okay, so I got my governor spring switched out to a softer one, so that should let my weights act a little quicker, because basically my RPMs weren't coming back quick enough. So he would have had to lug down the machine more and more for it to get the fuel that he needed. So that's why I switched that out. We're going to retest it and hope that it straightens out. Set my transfer pressure, set my main fuel, set my RPMs, set my advance. Now I basically just got my low idle. So on this one it has a screw on the lever, which is basically just a stop screw. So I'll set that for my fuel, then back it out one turn, and then set my fuel for the final time with this screw. Okay, so overall, this pump ran pretty good. Just had to make a couple minor adjustments. Running that different spring in there should maybe help them out a little bit up on the tire end. But overall, shouldn't have any more problems with the pump per se. Whether or not the rest of the machine is in good condition now, we don't know. But other than that, if anyone ever has any other questions, got a pump that we can do, give us a call, send us an email, send us a fax, doesn't matter. We'll look into it and be just like this. We'll get it wrapped up and send it back to you, get us new.
One of the common questions we get at area diesel service is, can I send you my pump and have you test it? People are unsure if the pump is the culprit or looking for diagnostic help. As you've seen, we definitely have the equipment to do that. The problem is each of these test stands that we run has many gallons of pretty high value calibration fluid in the stand. This thing's been sitting out in the woods for an unknown amount of time. the pump is suspect, potentially gummed up or seized or stuck. Whatever's inside this pump is now going to contaminate the test stand, which would result in a expensive testing bill or a contaminated test stand, or the next guy in line is going to get whatever is inside of your pump inside of their pump. In some instances, we may test a pump, if it's freshly rebuilt, if we're absolutely confident contamination is not an issue. But something like this, it's been sitting, it's pretty nasty. It's probably not going to go right on the test stand, at least not before a trained expert has an opportunity to look at and determine the level of contamination. Long explanation to a common question. Yes, we can test your pump, but we probably won't without first doing some exploratory surgery. If you do reach out to us and let us know that you learned of us through our YouTube efforts, we'll drop you a hat or some gloves, fender cover, whatever swag we're peddling at the time. Just let us know that you came to us from YouTube and we'll hook you up with something. That's it. Thanks for watching.